Hello and welcome. I'm Africa 54 Managing Editor Vincent McCory in for hashtag the You Want. It's Friday, May the 19th, and this is Africa 54. Rights groups say Sudan's warring sides are showing a reckless disregard for civilians in western Darfur. This news comes as the United Nations says there are more than 1 million people displaced from the fighting in Sudan. Breaking free from the addiction of the powerful synthetic opioid fentanyl can be a lifelong journey. And in our entertainment report, Uganda's Masaka Kids Africana video captures over 50 million YouTube streams, and the Maxwell will tell us all about it. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. We begin with the heavy fighting in Sudan on Friday as Khartoum and Bahri came under renewed air attacks. The war between the army and paramilitary forces is now in its fifth week. Mass looting by armed men and civilians is making life miserable for residents. Meanwhile, the United Nations Refugee Agency says more than 1 million people are displaced due to the fighting. 250,000 of them are refugees and more than 840,000 are internally displaced people, according to the UN spokesperson. Rights groups say Sudan's warring sides are showing a reckless disregard for civilians in western Darfur. Refugees in nearby Chad who have managed to escape the region say armed groups are targeting, harassing, and sometimes preventing others from leaving. Observers say there are growing concerns that the intense violence in western Darfur could spread to neighboring countries. Henry Wilkins, reporting from Chad, has more. We caution our viewers that this report contains graphic and disturbing images.
In the town of Kafrun on Chad's border with Sudan, the sound of gunfire is heard coming from the town of Tenvelti, about 900 metres to the east. Fighting had broken out overnight there between ethnic Arab armed groups and what witnesses said were black Sudanese civilians attempting to defend themselves from what they referred to as Janjaweed. Injured men began coming across the border to seek refuge and medical attention.
There have been clashes over the border, and some have entered the town. Some of us tried to defend ourselves.
A vehicle arrives to take the injured man to the nearest medical centre. Analysts say that intercommunal violence in West Darfur, triggered by Sudan's internal conflict which started on April 15th, is likely to spread across the border to Chad.
It's not in the interest of Europe or the United States or anyone for Sudan to continue to be in conflict, because it's 100% positive that the continuation and prolonging conflict in Sudan will spill over.
Back in Kafrun, chaos sets in among the thousands of Sudanese refugees who fled into Chad. The bodies of friends and relatives begin to arrive across the border. The refugees pulled the shirts over the faces of the deceased, makeshift shrouds. VOA counted at least 3 bodies. For some, the scenes were too much. Analysts point out that the Darfur War of 2003 quickly spread to this area of Chad.
It's something that's very dangerous, and that can very easily spread the fightings to Chad, because the composition of the forces and presence itself, it's very ethnic.
Chadian security forces begin to clear the area of crowds as more bodies come in. Later in the day, the Chadian chief of police, Hamid Daouda, gave this comment to VOA on the events that took place in Kafrun.
If it happened that the rebel Sudanese shot the gun or not under the Sudan government, I've said that all the measures has been taken. All are in control now. So if you have seen it happen, it will not happen next again. From where they saw it coming, measure is taken to master it. Thank you. Keep cool, and walk. Keep cool.
500 metres inside Chad, one bullet hit the ground nearby and another zipped past. Some members of the crowd began to panic and retreat. This reporter left the area. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Kafrun, Chad.
On to Asia now, where members of the group of 7 wealthy democracies at this year's summit are set to place more sanctions on Russia and crack down on those helping it to evade them, a move aimed at hampering Moscow's ability to fund its war in Ukraine. VOA White House Bureau Chief Patsy Widakuswara reports from Hiroshima, Japan.
President Joe Biden and other G7 leaders arrived in Hiroshima, Japan, armed with new sanctions targeting Moscow's ability to fund its war in Ukraine. In a meeting with summit host Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, Biden said the group stands for shared values,
including supporting brave people of Ukraine as they defend their sovereign territory, and holding Russia accountable for its new aggression, to ensuring a free and open Indo-Pacific.
Most of the sanctions are imposed by the U.S. on more than $58 billion worth of Russian assets.
While last year was maybe the year of sanctions, I think this year is the year of enforcement of those sanctions, as well as looking at what additional export controls could be put in place to ensure that Russia is not able to get the military capability and technology it needs to conduct its war.
However, the group will not announce a comprehensive ban on goods exported to Russia. The summit will also focus on countering what the group calls China's economic coercion, trade practices for political goals.
At the summit, I would like to demonstrate the unwavering determination of the G7 to uphold the free and open international order based on the rule of law.
As the summit opens on Friday, leaders are visiting the only structure still standing after the U.S. 1945 bombing of the city, now a memorial to peace. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News, Hiroshima, Japan.
Well, now, for more on the G7 summit, I'm joined, Associated Press correspondent Philip Crowder joins me live from Hiroshima, Japan. Good evening over there. Now, first, we saw, you're behind you, it's kind of dark right now, but our reporter Widakuswara kind of mentioned the building that you're standing in front of. Can you tell us the significance of this building during the G7 summit, right?
Yeah, you can see it just over my shoulder here. This is a dome of the only remaining building from Hiroshima before the nuclear bomb destroyed pretty much all of this city, leading to 140,000 people losing their lives. This city has been rebuilt since, but this area and the park around it, the memorial park, they have been very important to this G7 meeting already, with the heads of state and government visiting it and laying flowers there already. And this place could also very well be the backdrop, at least the symbolic backdrop, to the visit of the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The Japanese presidency of the G7 summit have wanted nuclear proliferation, or rather the lack thereof, the stopping thereof, to be one of the key subject matters of this G7 summit. And maybe Hiroshima will be used as an example of the very worst that can happen during wartime. Remember that in Ukraine there have been threats from Russia to use its nuclear weapons there. So what we will see here is the Ukrainian president, a president from a country at war right now, seeing with his very own eyes the very worst that can happen. And he will have warnings here that without the necessary help, both diplomatic and military, from the G7 member countries, but also from other countries who are here, that something similar could happen to his country.
So realistically, what can he expect to achieve there at that summit, Zelensky?
Well, what Volodymyr Zelensky will want from the G7 member countries is more military help, but also more diplomatic opportunities to get more countries on his side. Because there are some very important countries here who have been invited, who are not members of the G7 group. The likes of Brazil and India have essentially been neutral between Russia and Ukraine. There is a hope here from Ukraine, but also from the G7, that there will be peer pressure here, essentially, on those countries, that they might also side with Ukraine in the future. Now, very concretely on the military front, we are now hearing that US President Joe Biden has okayed the training of Ukrainian pilots on F-16 fighter jets made in the United States. That is a very significant development, because one of the key asks from Zelensky has been for months now, and will be here again, that he and Ukraine get fighter jets in order to defend the skies over Ukraine. It looks like he might be getting getting closer to that key ask from the Ukrainian government.
Very quickly, what else has been discussed at the summit?
Well, plenty, but a lot of it risks being overshadowed somewhat by the visit of Volodymyr Zelensky. The developing world has was very much invited here by the Japanese presidency. Comoros here representing the African Union. The Cook Islands are representing the Pacific Islands Forum, particularly important, of course, for the global south, climate change, but also, of course, rising prices, most notably in the developing world, in the likes of Asia and Africa and Latin America. There's always plenty to be discussed at these G7 summits, but there are also those headline moments, and the arrival of President Zelensky will be precisely that.
Always a delight, Philip. Thank you very much. Associated Press correspondent Philip Crowther reporting live on the G7 meeting in Hiroshima, Japan. Now, Russian-built helicopters are now on the ground in Zimbabwe. They arrived Thursday in what authorities say is part of an effort by Russia to strengthen relations between the two countries. Analysts say Russia is rewarding Zimbabwe for not joining the nations seeking to isolate Moscow for its invasion of Ukraine. Keith Baptiste attended the event in Harare, and Salim Solomon has this report.
Ladies and gentlemen, comrades and friends.
Russia held a handover ceremony of 18 Russian-built Ansan medical air and rescue helicopters to the Zimbabwean government at the country's international airport on May 18. Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa said the helicopters will help in disaster response and be used by the country's police force. He also took the opportunity to denounce long-running sanctions imposed by the U.S. and other nations for the use of violence against protesters and political opponents.
It's now 23 years under such yoke around our neck. The process, of course, we access science and technology from countries who are willing to support us. And the Russian Federation is one of them.
Russia's ambassador to Zimbabwe said the delivery was part of an eventual 32 helicopters that will be supplied to the country by 2025. The total value of the aircraft is $320 million. Sergei Chemzov, an ally of Russia's President Vladimir Putin and the chief executive officer of the state-owned defense conglomerate Rostec, which manufactures the helicopters, also spoke at the event. He thanked Zimbabwe for its diplomatic support.
I have to note that Zimbabwe is one of the countries that did not support anti-Russian actions at the international political arena. In turn, the Russian Federation is always ready to give a helpful shoulder to the friendly nation.
Jeffrey Smith, a human rights and pro-democracy activist with the nonprofit Vanguard Africa, says Russia needs allies in Africa and says the two nations have much in common.
They're both internationally isolated because of their anti-democratic leadership and the fact that they're beholden to, oppressive, autocratic, kleptocratic rule. They share much more in common than they have differences.
Some observers say Russia is looking to continue to expand its influence in Africa. Alexander Kovalenko is a military and political observer with the Information Resistance Group, a Ukrainian nonprofit organization countering Russian propaganda.
For Russian, Africa is a very important springboard for a spread of influence, not just political, but also military and most importantly, resource expansion.
Critics of the deal point out that Zimbabwe is rich in natural resources like diamonds, platinum, gold, and copper, which are of great interest to Russia. As the war in Ukraine and international sanctions continue to take a toll on Moscow, experts say Russia will continue to make overtures toward African countries. With Keith Baptiste in Harare, Zimbabwe, Salim Solomon, VOA News.
In other news, the Kenyan government is targeting businesses with new taxes aimed at filling its cash-strapped coffers. President William Ruto is now taking the politically unpopular step of raising taxes. Ruto's government has drawn up a 3.6 trillion shilling budget for 2023-2024, with the proposed new taxes expected to generate 289 billion shillings. Now, analysts say an African-Ukraine peace mission delegation announced by South African President Cyril Ramaphosa to try to end Russia's 15-month-old war in Ukraine is unlikely to succeed without the vested interest of global powers, and as Pretoria's neutrality in the war remains in dispute. And in the UN, the UN is warning that 1 billion people in 43 countries are at risk of cholera. The World Health Organization is seeking $640 million to fight the infectious disease. Cholera is contracted from a bacteria that is generally transmitted through contamination, contaminated water, or contaminated food. 24 countries have reported cholera outbreak this year. Now, some excitement. The 2023 Basketball Africa League playoffs begins on Saturday in Rwanda, and the third BAL finals tips off on May 27th. Joining us now from Kigali to tell us all about the BAL playoffs is viewers Sheikh Tero. Good evening, Sheikh, and tell us about the playoff teams to begin with.
Good evening, Vincent. As you can see, this is the calm before the storm, I call it. You can see behind me the vibrant gym in Kigali Arena. I would say the 8 team qualified from both conferences will face each other from the 20th to 27th. The first team tomorrow will be the Stade Malien. It will face off Cape Town tomorrow. After that, the Kigali team, Rwanda Energy Group, will face off Al Ali from Egypt tomorrow. And as you can see behind me, and it's very tremendous moment in Kigali here. The other team that's qualified, we know, is IS Douane from Senegal, qualified from the Saharan Conference. We also seen ISA ABC Athletic Group of Cote d'Ivoire is qualified as well to this Saharan Conference. For the Nile Conference, we have Petro de Luanda. After Petro de Luanda, we have Al Ali, we have Cape Town, and we also have Beira, Ferroviaria de Maputo, the Beira from Cameroon. And those Mozambique, those teams going to face each other off on the playoff. The A team is an elimination game, Vincent.
That was going to be fascinating. Now, there are some events that took place today on the eve of the tip-off. Can you tell us a little more? You spoke to some officials there?
Absolutely. We attended a press conference today with the president of Basketball Africa League, Amadou Galofal, with the Minister of Sport of Rwanda. And also, we had the president of FIBA Africa. And during this press conference, they highlight about how they're going to strengthen the relationship between BOL and Rwanda. And the Minister of Sport for Rwanda mentioned that she's looking forward to extend the contract with the BAL in the coming days, which the talk is going on right now. We also have information from Galofal stating that this vibrant gym will be sold out tomorrow, and there's no ticket to get in here tomorrow, Vincent. This is how exciting it is people from Kigali to come support the home team tomorrow. It's been so many events happening. We also attended players practices team, and we had a press interview with Rwanda Energy Group, who have a new coach. They also all highlight, with the captain all highlight about how important it is for them to win tomorrow in the front of the home crowd. And it's not going to be an easy game. At this point, they mentioned, everybody agreed that this moment of the tournament is very difficult to win a game, but they're hoping to win a game and learn from last season when they lost in a moment like that in the home court.
Well, thank you very much. That is very exciting stuff. I wish you all the best there. Sheikh Tero, VOA, reporting live from Kigali in Rwanda. Now, fentanyl is synthetic opioid which can be up to 50 times stronger than heroin. Is cheaply made from chemicals mostly coming from China, trafficked through Mexico, and then smuggled into the United States, according to U.S. law enforcement. Viewers Natasha Mazgovaya looks at fentanyl from the western U.S. state of Washington, showing how breaking free from its addiction can be a lifelong journey.
Mia Pridemore was 15 when she started abusing prescription drugs.
My parents were drug addicts,
and my whole family was drug addicts, and it was accepted. It was social. It was almost expected, and it was like it was just the way of life.
Pridemore says she was a functioning methamphetamine addict until she started smoking fentanyl.
It takes you over. It's like you don't care about anything else but your next fix. You know, I had a nice car, and I had, you know, I had a home, and it's like lost all those things because all I cared about was my next fix.
Public health advisor Brad Finegood says fentanyl goes in and out of people's systems more quickly than other drugs and has harsher withdrawal symptoms.
After a while, people aren't using because they want to get high. People are using because the withdrawal symptoms are so severe to keep themselves from getting sick. And so because that half-life is so short, they have to use more and more often just to not get sick.
The sickness of fentanyl withdrawal kept Thomas Carpina from seeking treatment.
Your body aches, your muscle, every bone in your body aches, your muscles are cramping up, you're throwing up, it's beyond explaining. It's the worst feeling in the world.
Seeking treatment away from their addictive environment, Carpina and Pridemore traveled 230 kilometers from Yakima to Auburn, Washington, where the Health Point medical team has helped more than 800 people with addictions over the past 5 years. Dr. Nathan Kittle says switching to rehabilitation treatment from fentanyl is more difficult than switching from other drugs.
With other opioids, prior to fentanyl, that switch could happen pretty easily within a day. There's be a little bit of suffering and a little bit of discomfort from the person making the switch, but I think it's only gotten harder because of some of the unique properties of fentanyl that kind of lingers in people's bodies.
Kittle says that for some addicts, recovery will be a lifetime of continued medication, akin to insulin for diabetics. Other addicts, he says, make different choices.
But there are people who can make lifestyle changes, can change their habits, can change the people they're around, can change the environment they're around, and maybe the medicine's good for a year or two, and then they can kind of come off of it because the rest of their life has improved so much.
The National Institute on Drug Abuse estimates that the relapse rate for opioid addiction is between 40 and 60%. Pridemore and Carpino say that it is a relief to be off fentanyl, and they're looking forward to getting jobs and staying clean. Natasha Mozgovaya, VOA News, Auburn, Washington.
Well, it's time now for our entertainment report, and joining us is Heather Maxwell, host of Viewers Music Time in Africa radio program, with the latest news and notes on the 7th edition of Eurovision and Uganda's Masaka Kids. Hello, Heather, welcome.
Hi, Vincent, thank you. Well, the annual Eurovision Song Contest took place in Liverpool, United Kingdom last weekend. 26 countries battled in the finals this year, and the act with the highest odds to win, yes, the public can wager bets online from almost anywhere in the world on this contest, did win, and that is Swedish singer Loreen Zainab Nora Talhawi, better known as Loreen. Loreen, who was born to Moroccan immigrant parents, took the prize for her song Tattoo. She's the second singer to win Eurovision twice, and the first woman to win twice. First time was in 2012. Her welcome home party in Stockholm was met with thousands of joyful fans, and this also is Sweden's 7th Eurovision win since the contest began in 1956. And to send you into your weekend with some good vibes from Uganda, here is Masaka Kids Africana with their most popular music video this year with over 50 million streams on YouTube, I Look to You. The song comes off of the group's album, We Are the Stars. To you, and that's it for today's entertainment. Back to you, Vincent.
I look to you, so thank you very much, Heather. Be sure to join Heather Maxwell's Entertainment Report every Friday here on Africa 54. Well, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a great weekend.